Successfully made it to class. Congratulations. So you have completed you have at least started a good portion of the class. The online, you guys seem to have figured that out. I think the schedule is pretty self-apparent in there. So let's just walk through. I'm not going to read the program objectives. It is odd. This is the first time I've had a class that had assignments due before we met. And you guys have had like four. Is it 4 or 5?
5.
You're starting.
This one is the 5th one now.
Yeah, you're starting the 5th one now. So it's a little different in that, but you guys seem to have. I was nice the first week of just tell me you've read the syllabus. So, well, I did that just because it's so easy to start something new and get overwhelmed in it and not know what's going on. And it was a new system. Are you guys? I enjoy might being the wrong word, but are you guys navigating the online system okay?
Yeah, like this one better because it tells you like what to do.
Yeah, it's far better than Oasis. Yeah, Oasis is way better, and I think it's helpful for me for grading because when I log in, I know I can see everything that's been completed. It just pops up on my screen. Excuse me. So I get to roll through that. So looking through here, forum posts constitute 30% of your final grade. You guys seem to be following the instructions pretty well. 250 to 300 words for your initial post, 100 to 150 words on another student post. You guys seem to be doing well with that. I don't have any issues. At this point, you have done the syllabus review, Systems by Andy Stanley, chapters 1 through 4, and then it was due by yesterday, was the second post for Human Resources. I'm sure we've all completed that, right?
Of course.
Yeah, all right, good. So this week you start Employee Benefits, chapters. Now understand on the book, even though you don't necessarily have a post due on every chapter, the expectation is still that you will read the book in its entirety, and one of the biggest values of that for you will be in the final project. There's a lot of resources in the book that are applicable in your final project. So once we get to talking about the final project, you'll understand. I'm not necessarily expecting you guys to reinvent the wheel on doing the project. So you are allowed to use outside sources. You're allowed to borrow from other churches. I just ask that you, at the end of the manual, let us know who you've taken it from. Because let's be honest, even the one that we use here at Bethel, we started with a template, and then we borrow policies and procedures from other churches also to make it in our manual. So read the book in its entirety, because there's a lot of good material in there that will help you clarify some of the things that are necessary in the case study. So you have your chapter starting the first week of October, chapters 5 through 8, then budgeting, hiring, firing, board meltdowns. The hiring, firing, and board meltdowns are, I'll acknowledge the videos before those are cheesy, but the principles and lessons of them are valid. The board meltdowns really doesn't necessarily fit in church administration in its whole, but it's part of a 3-part series that goes along with it, so it actually concludes the story that starts in hiring and continues on through firing and then board meltdowns. I think it gives you some real good leadership perspective on stuff. And then risk management is on the first week of November. Your online forum posts stop the second week of November. Chapters 13, 18, and 21 are the last ones due. And the reason that those stop is to give you sufficient time to complete the manual, because it is a large project, and I will encourage you to start on it early and work on it often, because it is a large project. Now, Velocity students, you have probably already heard from other students about it being a large project, but it's a large project. So if I didn't make that clear, it's a large project.
So it's a large.
It's a very large project. And outside of the forum posts attending today, the only other assignment that you have is the reflection paper on outside reading, which is due November 10th, which you'll submit it electronically via Advanced 360. There'll be a Dropbox. I don't know if you've had other classes that have utilized Advanced 360. It'll show up. The Dropbox will open that allow you to upload a file to that. So that's how all things are going to be submitted. It's a students will read one journal article pertaining to church administration and prepare a 2-page reflection paper. The paper will concisely summarize the author's main point. The summary should be no more than half a page. So it's double-spaced, standard Turabian, 1-inch margins, all that stuff. So when I say we'll concisely summarize, don't just regurgitate the entire article for a page and a half. I want half a page. This is what the article is about. In most articles that you read, you should be able to find a 1 or 2 sentence description of this is what the article is about. This is the main point. And then from there, the remaining 1 to 1.5 pages will dialogue with the reading, providing the student's own comments / reactions to points made by the author. The student may use other readings to support the student's position, make sure proper citations are used. Basically, do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? Why do you agree with them? Why do you disagree with them? And when I say, understand that sometimes it's difficult to find materials in ProQuest, in the databases that they have, anything dealing with church administration. So think of the things that we've covered in here. Human resources, hiring, firing, budgeting, creating systems, creating processes. These would all be valid. I mean, we've got you guys have some forum posts on risk management. So if you find something pertaining to safety and security within children's ministry, that would be a valid article in church administration because that's something that would be legitimate in what we're covering. So it's very broad when I say something pertaining to church administration and what you can write about. I mean, it could be how, something on ministers' housing allowance. I mean, it's an exciting subject. Actually, ministers' housing allowance would be an interesting one to write on right now because I don't know if we'll cover ministers' housing allowances here in a little bit, but a federal judge in Wisconsin ruled ministers' housing allowances unconstitutional. And so they have, for that region, ministers' housing allowances are currently suspended, but it's been appealed. So eventually, ministers' housing allowance, in my opinion, they will be removed, which is a huge thing for ministers. Because technically, ministers are self-employed. So when I do my taxes, I pay, whereas you work for a regular employee, they pay half of your FICA and half your, as a minister, I pay both parts. Plus, I pay the self-employment tax. But there's also some tax benefits I can get as a minister, and the housing allowance is one of those. So the rent on my house or my mortgage, if you have a mortgage, utilities, upkeep, all that stuff becomes non-taxable income for portions of the taxes. Self-employment, you still pay on it, but it's an interesting. That would be an interesting conversation, but that'd be a hard one to do in 2 pages. So, but you watch. You can say you heard it here first. Eventually, the courts will remove the minister's ability to take a housing allowance, and they will also eventually remove the nonprofit status of churches. So that's where we're headed as a country. So, so I think that assignment fairly self-explanatory. We all understand that one, right? Okay. The last assignment, which is the assignment, it's the main assignment, is the case study. The case study constitutes 60% of your grade. So basically what you get on the case study is what you get in the class. Not that the other material doesn't matter, because obviously the forum posts constitute 30% of your grade, so that can have a significant impact. But this is 60% of your grade. So failure to do this assignment, failure to do well in this assignment will reflect greatly in your final grade. This assignment is due December 8th, and late assignments will not be accepted. So, short of a death in the family that was prolonged, or there's some extenuating circumstances such as time as you in the hospital, that you've had the assignment, you've had the syllabus since the beginning of class. So if you give it appropriate time, you will have sufficient time to finish this assignment. But assignments, I won't accept it late, just because of the time it takes me to grade them, and the time the grades are due, and the amount of time you have to work on this. So this is one of those projects that you don't have to wait until the end to work on it, because there's elements that you'll cover in the reading as you go through it. There's elements that you cover through the videos as you go through it. So you can build it as you go, which is really what I recommend that you do, is work on it. So let's go ahead and just read through the assignment so that we have a clear understanding of the project. Based on the case study on the next page, using the required text, students will develop the following 5 elements for the project. Number 1, a 3-page summary of their action plan for dealing with the administrative challenges of the Church USA. Job description and employee benefit manuals. Pastoral procedural manual. Church-wide policy and procedural / office manual. You can call it either one, that's fine. And then a lay leadership manual. In the lay leadership manual, you can develop one that is a general, these are the requirements for all volunteers, or your expectations for all volunteers. Or if you are working within a ministry in your local context, I'm not sure, I know Velocity, you guys are involved with several areas, but you, Sandra, I'm not sure where if you volunteer in your current, do you attend Bethel, or do you attend another church?
No,
Okay.
I attend somewhere.
I've had other students in this class that were part-time youth pastors, part-time children's pastors, that kind of stuff, and I allowed them to take the lay leadership handbook and create a manual specifically for the ministry they were working in. So if you're working in a youth ministry, a children's ministry, if you're working somewhere and you want to develop a departmental specific volunteer for volunteers in this department, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure that you let me know so that I'm not looking for a general one and you decide the right one for worship teams or something. I want you, I do want this to be a practically applied project. So if you say, I would find this would benefit for me in the future, that's fine. That's fine. If you want to do a departmental lay leadership manual handbook that defines things for those that are on worship team, or Kayla, what track are you currently in? You're in youth. So you were in media last year, weren't you? So sure you don't want to try children's? I really think you should. For clarity, the manual should cover all policies and procedures that the student concludes are necessary for effective administration of the church in a case study. Policies should be appropriate for a church of 300. Students often borrow from manuals of much larger church. This has resulted in the creation of policies that are not sustainable by a smaller church. So here's why I put that little caveat in there, is because I have had a number of students that will borrow the employee manual for Bethel, and Bethel's a church of 2,000, so we have policies and procedures that don't necessarily apply at a church of 300. So I want you to think through the policies that are necessary for a church of 300. You can borrow principles from churches that are larger and smaller, but just make sure that's, so if you establish a policy that says all purchase orders must be run through the executive pastor of business administration, Church of 300 is not going to have an executive pastor of business administration. And one of the assignments in this project becomes real clear when you read the case study itself. You're the pastor of a church of 300 that has grown quickly. So you are hiring individuals to help sustain the load. So if you make a policy that says you have to run everything through the business administrator, but you haven't hired a business administrator, that's going to make that policy hard to enforce. Now, here's one of the things that churches of smaller sizes often do, is that they will often involve the board in roles that would be paid staff positions. An example, my home church growing up, we were a church of about 600, but we didn't have a large staff. So all facility and maintenance issues ran through a key board member that was over the facilities and maintenance. So if we had an issue or something needed to be fixed, we would contact that board member and they would take oversight of that. Whereas here at Bethel, we have a facilities manager. That's his role, that's his job. Church of 300 for the most time they're not going to have that. Church I was on staff at out in California, we had a board member that not only was he in charge of facilities as a church of 150, he was in charge of doing the work. So he actually reported to me in that capacity. So it was an interesting relationship there. But most of the time, especially at a smaller church, you're not going to have a paid facilities director. You're not going to have a paid business administrator necessarily. You're not going to have some of the paid positions that you'll find in policy manuals of a larger church. So make sure when you're making policies it's applicable to a church of 300. And so that doesn't mean you can't use policies and manuals. Just make sure that you've adjusted it to be appropriate for the church. Areas that you should consider: buildings and grounds, vehicles, scheduling, so like work hours, volunteer hours, etc. Personnel, insurance, vacation time, youth and children's ministries, purchasing and budget, equipment use. As we go through the PowerPoint for today, if you cover mainly the areas that we talk about today and have policies that pertain to those, you'll do fine. You'll do fine in the manual. These should be separate manuals, not one large manual. So don't just hand in the manual of the Church USA. You can hand them in one binder, that's fine, but they should be clearly delineated which is the manual for what. So just a simple cover page for each manual would be fine to help me separate out which one's which. Yeah?
Should all of these be separate manuals, or is there like certain manuals you have to read, or are we coming up with those on our own?
So the first five elements are what we're looking for here. So yeah, the 3-page summary. So the thing you turn into me should have 5 sections. Should have 5 sections, okay? Should have a 3-page summary of the action plan for dealing with the challenges. Then you have a job description / employee benefits manual. So the positions that this becomes real clear when we read the case study here. I'll come back to you and answer your question when we read the case study. Okay. So here's the case study. You're the pastor of the Church USA. You must provide oversight and guidance in the area of church administration. The church has experienced phenomenal growth from 35 people to over 300 people every week. You are currently the only paid staff member. This is an important thing to notate. You are currently the only paid staff member. You are overwhelmed with the administrative duties. After meeting with the board, you have been tasked with developing a plan for dealing with the challenges being faced. Your task is to create a 3-page summary of the action plan for dealing with the administrative challenges of the Church USA. And here's what that plan should cover. Define the plan with a timeline and specific goals. Create a church structure. Hire 3 additional staff members. Determine what positions are needed. So, in your plan, which is the first section of your manual, to deal with the administrative challenges, I feel like we need to hire a youth pastor, a children's pastor, and an office administrator, or whatever you deem as necessary. And then the timeline for hiring them. So I had one student turn it in, they had plans on hiring them over a 2-year period. I had another one that planned on hiring them in 2 weeks. So give yourself a realistic timeline. And then I've had other students that have given a real specific timeline. In the next 2 months, we will begin the interview process. So we will start accepting resumes immediately for this position. We will schedule interviews this far out. We will start, we hope, and then set target dates on when to have things hired by. Jim, that's all. Okay, just checking. All right, so the thing I want to make to note on this is several students have gone to presenting this plan as a letter to the congregation. Do not do this. I don't know where that thing came up with, but I had one set of students in one class, probably 2/3 of them presented their plan as a letter to the congregation. Don't do that. So this should be, write it out as a 3-page plan with proper formatting, adhering to the Bethel College style management. And then the next segment of that is the job description and employee benefit manual. So we're going to talk through employee benefits here today. But so let's say you decide to hire a children's pastor. What are the duties of the children's pastor? What are they responsible to do? And then what are the employee benefits? So what do they get for health insurance? What do they get for vacation? What are the requirements for sick leave? What are the work hours? These are the kind of the breakdown of the employee benefits. And then there's a pastoral procedural manual. So your 3-page summary is your first section. The job descriptions and employee benefits is your second section. Your third section is the pastoral procedural manual, and this would be something specifically for your pastoral staff. What are the policies that the church has in regards to counseling, to funerals, weddings? What is the weekly expectations of a pastor, which part of this might be repeated from the job description, but understand counseling, funerals, weddings, here's what I want to see in the counseling conversation. What safety and security procedures are necessary to conduct counseling in the church context? That might be one of those things where you go to a website like Church and Law and look at recommendations that they have for safety and security in counseling. What are the church's policies for using the building during funerals? What are the policies, so these are the things that you need to sort of think through, look at, and go through. A church-wide policy and procedural manual or an office manual, that's going to deal with how do you reserve a vehicle? Are copiers available to anybody? What about computer use? How do you manage the appropriate use of email? These kind of things that you need to think through and look through for that. And then your last one, the leadership handbook or the departmental manual that I said would be appropriate. So in answer to your question, Andy, these are all 5 different pieces. Okay. Now, you don't have to turn in 5 different binders to me. You can put them all in one binder. You just need to have them clearly separated when you turn them in. Actually, I prefer you don't turn in 5 different ones. I would also prefer that you don't turn them in plastic sleeves. I've had students do that where they've done it to make it look nice, which I appreciate. But I can't write on plastic sleeves. So if I have to pull it out to write on it, I'm not going to. You're just going to get a final grade without any comments on it. So if you could do that, that would be helpful. So 3-ring binder's fine. If you want to do a spiral binding on it, the church has a machine here if you want to borrow it. I mean, it's, this is one of the few assignments that I give in classes where layout and design matter. How it looks matters. So when you complete this, it should look presentable and nice. Something that you would be comfortable sharing with others. This spring I had 2 students, one got a 99 and one got a 100%. They both did such a phenomenal job. Both of them I told I would feel comfortable using their policy manuals for an actual church, which is what I want you to do. Other students, I have returned it to them and they received a C because it was so poorly done that I was embarrassed for them. They didn't pay attention to formatting. They weren't consistent in the font. There was no layout. There was no design. I mean, if you do this in Microsoft Word, it will help lay things out for you. It does a great job. Here is the thing I want to stipulate on this. There's an addendum 2 that has the rubric for grading. But understand this, a thorough project will typically range between 30 to 40 pages. So if you say, I'm done, and your project's 10 pages, you're probably not. And that's understand that's not 30 pages, 40 pages of single-spaced solid text. But by the time everything's laid out, it should be laid out nicely. 30 to 40 pages is where you're going to end up in that range. So if you look at Bethel's policy manual for the church, I think our policy manual is right around 45 pages, and that's just for the office policy manual. So now I had a professor of my master's degree. His church's policy manual, they didn't even bother to print it anymore. And it was so large, it was just on CD. It was something like 180 pages long. They had a policy and a procedure for everything.
How big was this church?
Church about 1,500, 1,600. So in my experience, a church that spends that much time with that many elements, they've gotten sued for something. So they are, they're making sure that they are covered. So, so when you look at addendum 2 for the required pieces, 50% of the grade is making sure you have those 5 sections. Making sure you have those 5 elements. I know 50% of the grade is it's not that hard. Formatting and presentation accounts for 20% of the grade. The thoroughness of the manual / and plan, so that first 3 pages is important. Have you covered and given consideration to all the areas that are necessary? Have you thought through Like if you do something where, let's say you decide to do a departmental manual, and you decide you're going to do children's and youth ministry, and you don't do anything in regards to background checks or volunteer requirements, you haven't given this consideration. If there's nothing in your manual as to how somebody requests money to pay for something, you haven't given a thought. If there's nothing in consideration of vacation policies or work hours or sick leave or those kind of things, if you think through it and you don't have something in there in regards to educational benefits, yeah, they'll be okay with that. There's a lot of churches that don't have anything in regards to educational benefits. But some of the basic stuff that we cover in this class, if you're missing the basic elements, that's going to hurt that 20%. And then 10% of your grade is spelling and grammar. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. If you choose to do things by bullet point for layout, that's fine. Just write in complete sentences still. It's helpful to just the general readability. I want you to be comfortable using this as an actual paper, an actual project that you would, because eventually you're going to leave college, hopefully, and if you do this well, you will be able to utilize this in an actual position. That's why I give you the freedom to do this for a departmental ministry if you're working towards a specific area that you want to work in. The first church I was on staff at, I used multiple projects that I had developed in my undergraduate. And in my master's, it was the same thing. I had, and actually it's been the same thing in my doctoral project. The project that I did for my first doctoral paper involved a 7-week coaching session with all of my direct reports, one-on-one. So that was entirely applicable to my work. And I want you to be able to do that same thing. I want you to be able to use this as a reference in the future. So that's why I've actually adjusted the assignments. I know it seems like this class has a lot of assignments. When I first took over this class, there was a 2-page paper due on every single chapter in the book and the case study. So, and how many chapters are there in the book? They're like 25. So that was like, it was like 50 pages of writing plus the case study. And I know it sounds like I did it for you. I don't want to grade that much. So that's why we did that. So, but again, that is due December 8th, which I think is a Monday, if I've got that right. I typically, on big projects and stuff, I try and make things due on Mondays. So that way, yeah, it's a Monday. That way you have the last weekend to cram if you need it. But hopefully you won't need that for this. So, any questions in regards to that? Okay. In here, in the syllabus also, there is the spacing got goofy, but the addendum 1, the rubric for evaluating the quality of students' writing. This here is really going to be used on your outside reading paper. So basically, that's a quick, easy understanding of what we're going to look at. And then there's addendum 3 in the syllabus, which is, I include that in every class that I do just to help you grow as a writer. How many of you this semester, this is not necessarily for this class specifically, have utilized Grammarly yet?
Yeah, I've tested it.
Yeah. Let me tell you this, and Grammarly is it's a free tool that Bethel College is providing. If you haven't used it yet for papers that you're turning in, you are hurting yourself because it is a wonderful tool. I used it. I was introduced to it when I started my master's degree. AGTS provided it to us as part of our as a student. It was in many cases as good as a paid editor, which I utilize those also. So I've used it in my first 2 doctoral projects for the editing and proofing, and it's it is worth the time it takes to go through it. Most of your papers aren't of great length, so you should be okay. But a 5-page paper, probably, well, let's say I did a 6-page paper yesterday that I used on it. I uploaded it. My initial grade that Grammarly gave me was a 71% because I had written it very quickly. But it picks out all the problems and stuff, and by the time I had corrected everything and ran it back through, it gave me a 92%. And I think on Grammarly, some of the things that they want you to fix, it's really their preference. It might be an actual rule in grammar, but I don't. If you can get your paper to a 90 or above, you will have sufficiently answered most of the grammatical concerns that your professor is going to have. So it's a great tool. It doesn't fix it for you. It teaches you the rules. Sometimes it'll make suggestions on what you can do, but it will dramatically improve the quality of your writing. So I would encourage you to use it. If you don't know how to get to it, bcba.edu, and then where it says My BC, there's 3 options there: the Campus SIS, Advanced 360, and the Grammarly. It's great. I would strongly recommend using it. I even use it when I'm doing blog posts for myself. You know, it's when I'm you know, I don't check emails, but you know, I do use it for other areas. So I would encourage you to do that. So any questions? No questions. Okay. Well, let's do this then. It is it's 8:40. So we've gotten a good start here. Let's take a just a 5-minute comfort break because we get stretched out here and awake. So come back at 8:45, and then we'll start our first session, the introduction to